Steve Stanley is a thinker and a doer. His career began in education, eventually becoming CEO of the Centre for Excellence in Teaching, providing professional development to more than 30,000 teachers across Western Australia. In parallel, he built a distinguished career in the Australian Army Reserve, retiring as Lieutenant Colonel and Commanding Officer of the 16th Battalion, Royal Western Australian Regiment. Today, Steve is a director of the CEO Institute WA and Team Smart, where he designs and delivers strengths-based leadership development and organisational change programs. He's worked across business, government and elite sport, including with BHP, Chevron, the West Coast Eagles, my favourite of all of your customers, and the WA Institute of Sport. Steve, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Good to be here, Brad.
So you're sitting down, you've just endured a heart attack, and you're waiting for the ambulance. Tell me, what's going through your mind?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because when you're waiting for the ambulance, you've got no idea whether you've got minutes left or you can be taken care of, resuscitated, brought back, whatever it happens to be. So when my wife was getting the ambulance organised, there was a moment when I lay there and I thought, hell, this could be it. I may only have a few minutes left because I don't know what's going to happen next. So it does make you sit back and think, wow, there's a lot of stuff I didn't get to do. This could be it.
Wow. And I guess, what are the things that you didn't get to do? To draw on that thread?
I think mostly, by the way, it was only a mild heart attack and it's all good.
Good.
It all worked out for the better. It certainly didn't take me any deeper into health issues, but it was the thing that went through my head more than anything else was family. And straight away, you didn't think about what the business looked like, how much was in the bank. My immediate thoughts went to the fact that my 4 girls could no longer have a dad. And that was the most powerful thought going through your head when you were lying there waiting, not knowing what was coming next.
And is that because you were, let's say, absent, or I would say average, or highly engaged with them, or it's just not even about that? You're saying it was just, that's what's the overriding thought?
It was the overriding thought, but there was also that fact that, as a lot of business leaders do, you believe you're building a legacy for your kids and building, a wealth supply that is going to be of benefit to them.
Yeah.
But the one thing that the kids want more than anything else is your time. And there were times in my life when, especially when I was in the Army Reserve and working in education, that you were away more often than you were home. And that does play on your mind. The good thing from my perspective is the girls are all older now, and therefore it was more the fact that they rely on me to have conversations with, to ask advice of, which they often don't take on board, but they still ask. And my grandkids, one of them called me a wise man once, and it just sort of rung with you and thought, wow, that's a really nice thing to say.
Yeah.
So it's more the thought that if I'm not going to be here anymore, they have no access to me naturally.
Yeah. And it's not about ego, it's about one of the reasons I've done all these things, without letting me put words in your mouth, one of the reasons I've done all these things is so that I can help the children, the grandchildren, to not have to go through those lessons painfully, perhaps.
Yeah, it is. And you build up a wealth of experiences throughout your life, and that's exactly the case. You then hope that it can shortcut some of the difficulties that they're going to face in situations that they come up with. I've got a couple of daughters who are in leadership positions, and they will occasionally run stuff past me.
Yeah.
So they've got a sounding board, someone to ring up and say, hey, Dad, got this person at work who's doing this. This is what I'm thinking you're doing. What do you reckon? So not being there anymore means that all that knowledge and experience has disappeared.
So the ambulance comes, you get carted off to hospital. And then what? How do you take that realization, that recognition, and what happens next?
Essentially, after you're released from hospital, they whack a stent in and sort of sort the blockage out, and away you go.
Yeah.
You need to rest. So they say to you, you're going to have to take couple of months at home doing very little and repairing yourself, because a heart attack is a muscle issue and you actually need that muscle to repair. So don't exert yourself and do too much.
Yeah.
Which is hard to take when you're working. It's like, okay, well, now I've got to sit here and basically rest each day for the next couple of months at least. So that didn't sit well with me. And it was at that point in time I thought, what about if I wrote down a lot of the pieces of advice that I've collected over all the years? Because I've got a lot of notes, got a lot of notebooks, and, have recorded a lot. So I thought this might be an opportunity just to put some thoughts down that might be seen as a guide for the girls and the grandkids as they get older, that there's something to refer to.
Yeah.
And this whole knowledge base hasn't been lost forever.
Well, so this is a book that you created as a result of that. Now, this book hasn't been published. It is in private hands only, and it's not intended to be published. But I came to do a presentation to some of your clients, and you ever so kindly graced me with a copy, which I did not appreciate the weight of the document that I'd just been handed. To add clarity to that for listeners, yes, I took it away. Yes, I started to skim it as you do. And then it turned out that what we developed in our family at dinner was we would read a page or two or three each night over dinner and then discuss the topics in there. Such is the gravity of the content that is in there. And so what I thought that we could do is just go through a few of those lessons that you've learned today in the book, which is entitled Lessons Learned.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Look, the reason I didn't publish it, I intended it for family and close friends. So I haven't cited references and gone through the full literary process for producing a book. I paid for the book to be produced so that the kids had it. So I've given it to all the family, and a couple of the grandkids are a little bit younger, but their parents are keeping it for them as they get a bit older. So it was meant for people to have. And even with the grandkids, I've said, if you want to colour it in, you're welcome to do that. It's yours and you can do what you want with it. But it's stuff that I've picked up that I felt was worthwhile somebody having as a reference.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to start with the first lesson in the book. And there's 39 lessons. We're not going to be able to cover them all.
No.
The first is own your own mistakes and your successes. And so you're talking about where we are in life, the situation we find ourselves is a result of all of our decisions, not outside forces. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I've always felt that. And then I heard a really good TED talk from a guy named Jocko Willink.
Yep.
Navy SEAL in Iraq. Battle turned into a mess. It was friendlies against friendlies. And he went through the whole process of assessing what mistakes were made and how it all played out. And the brilliant part of his talk at the end was he said, I realised that as the commander, I was the one at fault. And any mistakes that anyone made was due to the fact that I didn't prepare them well enough, give clear enough orders, whatever it might be. And he then flowed that on into business in his book. And it's always sat with me because basically he says there's only three things in life you have to do. One is be born, one is die, and the other is make decisions. And therefore, where you sit today is as a result of every decision you've made, not as a result of someone else's influence. It's the decisions you've chosen to make that place you where you are. If you don't contribute enough to super and you get close to retirement age and really you're short of money, they're decisions you've made along the way.
So just for clarity, super is the retirement account that's compulsory in Australia?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks for that. Sorry. So yeah, it's your position in life and where you are is a result of the decisions you've made. So it says you need to own your mistakes, but work out a way to correct them. But you also need to own your successes. So if you've been successful, accept it. But if you've made a mistake, learn from it and learn to do it better next time. And I think in our society at the moment, there's a real trend not to own any mistakes. We'd rather litigate. It's like it's got to be someone else's fault. Can't be mine. And I think that's a sadness because it takes responsibility away from all of us.
I laugh because I was going to ask you exactly the same question. Do you think the context of today, it's getting better or worse? Did you select this to be number one for any particular reason? Was there a consideration behind that being number one?
Yeah, there was, because if you're not prepared to accept the decisions you've made and look to correct them, there's no point in reading the rest of the book. You know,
Yes.
if you're going to blame somebody else, you can read the rest of the book and go, oh, well, that's not up to me and that's not my fault, and so be it, but bad luck. So it's like, take responsibility for where you are at the present time. And if you want to be different, you can read the rest of the book, but accept that you need to make those decisions to change your behaviour or take on board advice and amend what you do to get to where you want to get to.
I've often thought my adopted dad was in national service, which is, for the listeners, 1 year of compulsory military service when you're around about 18 years old, that everyone has had to do at that point in time, but they don't do now. And I have a similar take on that first one, which is there's no such thing as an excuse. If you treat excuses are not real, then you've got to kind of dig in. And I often have thought in my interactions with you, whether or not the way that because that national service had a massive impact on him, which then flowed through to me in different ways. And I've often been curious in myself. I wonder if that influence of the military on me is why I feel somewhat of a connection when we have conversations around some of these topics. Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I don't know. You know, having been in the Army Reserve for 30 years, there's things that you learn about discipline and the way you go about doing things that just become second nature to you.
Yeah.
And even as simple as you always make the bed when you get up, you know, that's just step number one.
Yeah.
There are things that you do in life that you learn that just become habit, and it is dependent on your circumstances. And I'm not for a minute saying that you are only a result of your own decisions all the way along the line, because there are external circumstances, especially when you're a child. But as you get older, it's the choices you make that take you to where you want to be.
Yeah.
You know, and we've all seen people make wrong choices, and you've seen the consequences a lot of times as to what happens. But you see people who make the right choices.
Yeah.
And it gets them closer to where they want to be.
Well, before I move on, I'll just make this closing comment on that. I, for one, am an advocate of national service. And if there's any politicians listening to this, just jump in and do it. Let's do Australian national service. So a good segue perhaps into the next one. This is the one that I put a post-it note on, which is excuses versus discipline. I touched on it, but the phrase that you've got in here is excuses make today easier, but tomorrow harder. Discipline makes today harder and tomorrow easier, if I got that right.
Yep.
So, tell us about that if you can, and perhaps where you've seen that play out in life.
I think it's an interesting concept, because what you can say, if you want to get fitter and you want to start jogging, and you wake up one morning and it's belting with rain and you say, oh, I'll start tomorrow, that's an excuse. It's raining. And as they used to say to us in the military, God made skin waterproof. So, get over it. It's only water. It's not going to kill you. And but underlying that is the fact that, do you really want to get fitter by running? Or have you just thought momentarily, maybe this is what I should do? So if you make excuses and not give yourself the discipline to do what you need to do, you do make tomorrow harder with excuses.
Yeah.
And yes, if you are disciplined and go for a run today, even though it's raining, today's hard, but tomorrow it gets easier because you're getting fitter and you're doing the things you need to do.
Yeah.
And that applies all the way down the line. And I remember I was working with a golfer, and this individual said to me, I struggle a bit in tournaments because if the weather's not right, I don't play good golf in the wind. There's certain things that happen along the way that just do my head in. And I said to him, does every other golfer on the course that day have problem with wind? Well, no. I said, well, so why do you? I don't know. And I said, listen, that's an excuse. It's like you're playing a tennis match. Both of you are playing under the same heat conditions as the opponent. It's the discipline to deal with that that's important, not the excuse making that lets me off the hook.
Yep.
And that's the whole point of that piece in the book, is to say, if you want to be successful, you need to have the discipline to make the right choices, not make excuses as to why you've made poor choices.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we do a lot in modern society now, is we look to the excuses as to why this has happened. It's always, if you're late to a meeting, I didn't know there were roadworks on that road, and I've got caught up in the roadworks. Well, if you're disciplined, leave 15 minutes earlier.
Yeah.
Give yourself 15 minutes at the other end waiting in the car before you go in. But don't make an excuse that the roadworks are there, there was an accident in front of me, there was all these things that happened that are just excuses for the decision you've made to leave late.
And it erodes your character from both perspectives, from your own, because you've got to live with these consistent excuses, A, and then B, you need to, you put up with that person. It makes me, one of the great West Australians is a chap called Charlie Court, and I always remember he said, I think it was, if you're not 10 minutes early, then you're late.
Yep. And they always told us that in the army. If you're not there 10 minutes before start time, then you are late. So that sticks with you. But, one of my grandchildren said to me recently, or at the end of last year it was, I didn't do so well in that subject because I really didn't like the teacher. And I said, so you didn't perform in the subject just because you didn't like the teacher. So doing the work that was required was put on hold because the teacher wasn't nice to me.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go on.
We all do that, but it's like you've got to get out of that habit as you get older and start looking at the discipline required to succeed, regardless of who the teacher is or whether you like the subject. If you want to be successful, do the work.
When I was younger, I used to race cars, and there was a series of complaints that would always be bandied around. The track is this, or this is what the marshals said, all of this type of stuff. And there was always one reaction that would cut through, which is, well, a great driver can win in any circumstance. And it's just kind of what you're saying through a different lens. And I've always carried that, because it's like, yeah, but if you get over the situation, if you're aspiring to be great, then you can win in any circumstance. This episode is brought to you by Evolution Partners, where we help leaders to confidently build enduring great companies using our proven, structured, strategic planning process that ensures you build and execute the right plan to build the business that you want and the life that you want. Check us out at evolutionpartners.com.au. And you can also check out our books, Made to Thrive, which is about the 5 roles of a CEO, becoming a great CEO rather than just a good CEO in your business. Second is Onboarded, which is about hiring and onboarding great people, making sure that you give yourself the greatest chance for people to succeed in your organization. And then third is Bigger Isn't Better, Better is Better, which is about building a business that is better rather than bigger. It's not about building a little business. It's about building a business that compounds, a business that you can actually fall in love with again. I want to move on to chimp brain. So some of us are familiar with the different types of the brain, the different parts of the brain, but I like the way that you kind of give situational circumstance to how this can negatively impact situations.
Yep. It's a really interesting topic for people to look into, because there's the limbic system in the brain. And the limbic system is where all of our innate activities, thinking, behaviours come from. And if I ever talk to people about the chimp brain, you say, look, this limbic system is, how does a giraffe, when it's born, know that it has to go on its feet to get into the middle of the herd to survive? How does it know that? How does a human baby know that crying is what gets you attention? Because that's where it sits, in that innate chimp part of the brain. And the chimp part is also the limbic system, is where our emotions come from. And I will talk to people about the fact that if you have an argument with somebody based on emotions, there is never a winner. And if you've ever had an argument with a spouse or a partner and it's emotionally based, it just causes upset and there's never a good outcome because we're both going to argue from that point of view of emotion. And it's the chimp in your brain that is trying to keep you safe and steady.
Yeah.
So that's why it will do that. And I've said on a number of occasions to people, that's why in a pub, I should go back. 3 of the things that prevent you elevating your thinking from chimp thinking, which is emotional fight or flight thinking, into rational thinking, alcohol, drugs. And so you see 2 guys in a pub that bang into each other and they've been drinking for a while. One pushes the other, it escalates, and the next thing you know, you're fighting. Rationally, you wouldn't do that. But when you're not thinking rationally, that's what happens. And it's the chimp part of your brain that's trying to make you safe. And the other important part of that is a chimp in real life is 5 times stronger than a human being. And the chimp part of the brain is 5 times stronger than the rational part. So it doesn't take much for us to be involved in emotional thinking and eliminate the opportunity to think rationally.
Yeah.
And that's how that works. So the more emotional and head up you are, the less likely you are to make a really smart decision.
How do you stop or shortcut that? Because you started off saying if you're in an argument with your spouse or something, is there a way that comes to mind that you can recognize that behavior and then arrest that or bring that under control?
It's very hard to arrest it because it's so powerful. The best thing you can do is call a pause and say, can we think about this and perhaps talk about it later on this evening or tomorrow or whatever it happens to be. But you need to cool down, both of you. And then what you've got to do is work out what was the real cause of the problem. We've got all emotional and we're fighting and we all think of all sorts of things, and you'll see lots of Instagram posts saying women can even remember things that you haven't done yet. So it's like, instead of regurgitating all the past disturbances that's been between the 2 of you, stop and work out what this problem is and see if we can come up with a solution. But if we start yelling and screaming and getting emotional at each other, it just is never solvable. And the same happens in the workplace. If you get somebody who's emotional, the only opportunity is to wait for them to calm down, then sit and try and look at what happened and work out if there's a way we can think our way through it.
Somewhat interconnected or a similar topic is ego can be damaging, where you say, is it the right thing or an ego thing?
Yep. And that's connected to the chimp brain.
Yeah.
Because you've again got that situation where I want to be right because I want to prove that I'm better. And that whole situation of ego getting into play is what destroys a lot of leaders. And I've talked to so many leaders and said that, you actually have to remove the ego from it. And I know one person who only ever speaks last in a meeting. They let everyone else do the discussing, get everything out on the table. And then at the end, I'll step in and say, I've heard what everybody's said. I'm proposing this probably is the better way forward. What do you think? And the reason they do that is if they talk first, people sit there and they go, that's the way the boss is thinking. I'll play along with that and I'll massage that ego and I'll go with it. So it's subjugating the ego is extremely difficult because we've all got one and we all want to feel that we are the alpha, but it's not in the best interests of people in most occasions. So learning to bag your ego and hold it steady is something that takes a lot of work.
And I think it shows up in many different situations and conversations where you may not even be aware that it's affecting you.
Yeah, absolutely. Your ego dominates subconsciously. Any situation where somebody is discussing something with you or involved in a look at 2 sides of an argument makes us want to go, my side is the only right side. I don't know where you're coming from.
Yeah.
And that's part of the problem we've got in society in this day and age is people always want to be right and never accept that somebody else has a viewpoint.
I saw, second or third time we've mentioned society today, I saw a comedian up on stage just in one of those short clips that you see. And she was explaining to the audience about Gen X. I'm Gen X. And she was saying, well, there is this thing that we used to do when we were younger, when we were Gen X, and it's called critical thinking. It's a remote concept, but what we used to do is hear one side of the story and then we'd process it. We'd hear the other side and then we'd come to a conclusion. It was facetious, but yeah, it's somewhat being lost, and maybe that's a little bit connected in there. I didn't.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go on.
I'm agreeing. Yeah, absolutely. I think that is the case. And, I know there's been a lot of talk about woke and everything that goes with that. And it seems to avoid the balance. It's almost like if you don't agree with me, then you're wrong.
Yeah.
You can't have a view and there can't be anything that meets in the middle. It's either my way or there's no way. And there's just too much of that going on.
Yeah. It's a lesson that we can only hope that the broader society begins to come across. I don't know how, but it's certainly necessary. I didn't think that I'd see maths in this book, I've got to be honest, but we come to the next point, which is the trust equation, which is really fascinating. This is, I'm going to say it, I'm going to just get you to expand and explain it. Intimacy plus reliability plus credibility, all of those together divided by self-interest. So tell us about this trust equation and how you think about that.
I must say right from the outset, the trust equation is not mine. It's been around for a long time and many people use it and cite it, but I use it with people that I work with, and it is that equation that you just read out. And basically what it says is for anyone that you know, you can look at intimacy, which is simply the degree to which you know someone. So the more I know you, the more I trust you. And that applies to anybody. So when you meet someone for the first time and you say, I got a really trusting feeling with that person, you want to be really, really careful because you don't know that that's actually the case. And there's plenty of charlatans out there that will make you feel trusted and turn out not to be who they seem to be. So intimacy is one of them. The next one is reliability, and reliability is do you do what you say you will. So if you tell me, Steve, I'll have this ready by 4:00 this afternoon for you, do I believe you or not? Is that the Brad that I know, or can I go, I'll probably get it in 2 days?
Yeah.
So reliability is one, and the last one up there is credibility. Credibility is very simply, do you tell the truth or do you lie? And the trouble with that is you can tell the truth 1,000 times and you tell one lie and you undo every truth you've ever told.
Yeah.
With that individual, because they go, well, how do I now know you've never lied to me before? And you go, well, I haven't. Well, you just did then.
Yeah.
So how do I know you telling me that is the truth anymore? So, and that includes in a business sense, half-truths, not telling people things that they should know. So it's a broader thing than just telling the truth or telling lies, but trying to tell people that the business is in this situation when that's not really the truth will come back and bite you later on. So essentially what you can do, you can actually give them figures. So you could give a score out of 100. How well do I know someone? Plus how credible are they? Plus how reliable are they? And that would give you a score out of 300. But what you do is you divide it by this thing called self-interest. And self-interest is simply, is this person doing this because they want to improve their status, or are they genuinely doing it to help me? So if you're in a work setting and you think you've got a supervisor who's doing XYZ for you, but in the back of your mind you think they're only doing that because they want to get promoted, they're not really doing it to help me, then you would divide a large number into the number above and it would reduce your trust. And when you look at that carefully, you can actually score everyone in your life according to those calculations. But that's how it works. How well do I know you? Do you do what you say, and do you tell the truth?
In the work that we do, we talk about becoming more coach-like as a leader. So you need to ask more questions. And one of the lessons you've got is don't give advice. And in that section, I think you dig into a story from a military mentor where he had taught you that he wasn't going to give you advice. He was going to get you to undertake critical thinking. But then there was one day where you said, come on, just this one time, and can you please just tell me what I need to do here? And I love the reaction, if you can remember it, that he gave to you.
Yeah, it was a guy named Nick Norris who was actually shot down in MH31 in that Russian missile incident with his two grandchildren. Wonderful guy, and he would frustrate the daylights out of me because you'd go to him for advice as your boss, and he would simply ask you a string of questions. And at the end of it, he'd go, "See, you know the answer." And you're right. On that one occasion when I said to him, "Look, I'm so frustrated, just tell me what to do," he said, "If I tell you what to do and it goes wrong, then you'll blame me. And what I need you to do is take responsibility for what you make the decision to do." And it was at that point that I knew what he was doing. And you went, wow, this guy actually is much smarter than you give him credit for. And it's his ego that is subjugated because
Yeah.
he's going, I could easily tell you what I'd do, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to make you work it out because that's how you will learn. But he also was prepared to give you the capability to make the mistake without crucifying you for it. But it was that issue of, you will learn if I don't tell you what to do. Because if I tell you what to do, you're doing what I want you to do, not what you feel natural doing.
Assumptions versus facts. Assumptions are the basis of most mistakes. Tell us about that.
Yeah. See, we make assumptions based on only what we know. So you may not know all the facts. And there's been lots of historical examples of people who've made decisions based on the facts they knew at the time, but later on, other things have come to light and you realise that decision wasn't the best one. And that happens to everybody. But it's that issue, and when you get into an argument, it's assumption-based.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you think I'm an idiot, therefore I'm going to argue strongly with you. And the assumptions that I've made are informing my argument where I may not have all the facts at hand because I haven't done the research. And this goes on to, in organisations I've worked with, we talk about gossip and say, you're gossiping on information that you do not know to be correct. Someone told you that. And you don't know that that's the case, but you're then going to go and tell somebody else, and that whole story will go around, and it may not have a grain of truth to it at all. And if you want, I can tell you a quick story on that.
Please do.
Pardon me. I was in a selection committee meeting at West Coast Eagles, and I was taking notes thoroughly. Next day, in the paper was reported that a player wasn't playing for this reason. And I was reading the story, and I turned to my wife and I said, do you know what? I was in that meeting and that guy's name was never even discussed, let alone the reason why he wasn't playing. So I said, I have no idea how that can be reported in the press when it absolutely is totally untrue. And I asked one of the coaches the next day, I said, how did this come to be? And they said, it's probably a player manager who's spreading that to get the guy to be picked in the team. So it's not true. It's malicious. It's got an intent behind it. But if anyone reads that article, the assumption is that that's correct because it's printed in the paper. It's dangerous.
Tell us about the work that you did with West Coast, because West Coast, for those who don't know, it's an Australian rules football club based here in Perth. They've had a very tough run over the past several years. But before that, a bit of a better run. Just give us a quick overview, if you can, on the work you did with that football club.
Yeah, we started in late 2000, and it was a very interesting process because the coach at the time said to me, because of modern sports science, on average, every club in the competition is as fit as every other club. And he said, because of the draft, the average ability of players is equal across the competition. And that's the way the draft works, to even out the competition. And he said, what makes a difference between winning and losing is between the ears. And I don't know how to deal with that well enough. So we'd like you to come on board and see what you can do with the players. So it was back then that we established a set of values that the players needed to live by. We're very careful in measuring their behaviours against those values. And they went from 8th 3 years in a row to second and then first, winning the premiership in 2006. And I stayed on with West Coast till 2010, I think.
Yeah.
Dealing with these issues of culture, leadership, and the ability to turn into behaviour what's needed to be successful.
Yeah.
And when they all bought into it, that was when they really had their successful period, that you've got this chunk that we all believe in and we will all push ourselves to do this. It did come off the rails a little bit with some behavioural problems.
Yeah.
And they rewrote the values, but wrote them too far off field and not enough on field. And that put them into a little bit of a tailspin for a while.
Yeah.
But they got the balance right and came out of that the other end, and then went on, of course, and won the 2018 premiership.
Yeah.
So it was a very interesting period of time. It's got some things to it. I remember one of the players came and gave a talk for me to a business group. And after we walked away, he said to me, "Steve, why do they employ some idiots?" And I said to him, "Beg your pardon?" And he said, "There were some people who came up and talked to me afterwards." And he said, I didn't think they were all that smart. And I said to him, "You don't understand the real world, because you come from a world of total elite.
Yeah.
You have the most elite trainers. You live in a world of elitism at the top of your game." And I said, the workforce throughout the rest of Western Australia is not all elite. And sometimes people need someone to do a job, and that's who they employ. And he said, "Oh, I've got a bit to learn." I said, "Yeah, you have when you finish playing footy, that's for sure."
What were you proud of at the time you spent with that football club?
I was proud of the fact that we were able to create an environment that led to success and that the players were able to buy into. And it was also a values-driven environment that allowed them to correct some of the areas that they were going wrong with.
Yeah. Yeah.
There were some players who left during that period, and they were able to get on top of some issues that were causing the club trouble.
Very good. Second chances, but never a third. It's a very interesting, I guess, rule to live by. Tell me about that.
I think it applies more to business than anything else, I
Yeah.
think. But it's one of those situations that if we're too soft and want to be the nice guy, you allow somebody to end up taking advantage of you.
Yeah.
So it's a situation that if somebody makes a mistake, you point it out to them and they have a chance to correct it. If they do a second time, you do it again. But if they do it a third time, it's a habit.
Yeah.
So you need to eliminate that, which means either that person goes or they create a situation where they can't make that mistake again. But I also think we do that with our own kids. It's like we sometimes give them too many chances instead of being that little bit firmer and saying, "No, this is the second time you've done it. There won't be a third," or "This is the consequence." And if you've ever had a pet, it applies there too.
Yeah.
You know, you've got a dog that barks too much and you correct it the first time, correct it the second, but then go, "This is too hard." You'll never stop that dog barking too much. So it applies through life. I think you've got to be a little gentler with your kids, not be such a disciplinarian that it goes over the top.
Yeah.
But I do think in a work setting it applies. 2 mistakes, okay. Third, no. Now it's a habit and they're not learning.
I want to make the last question a combination of two of the lessons. The first is family is the greatest success and time is the greatest gift.
Yep. And that, as I said, that takes me back to the heart attack. When you're sitting there, this is genuine. The only thought going through my head when I wondered whether I was going to get through this was the sadness my family would be in if I went there and then.
Yeah.
And there was no thought going anywhere else. So I know lots of people have written, when you die, you don't look back and go, I wished I'd spent more time at work. That doesn't happen. But none of those thoughts were there. It was only that issue of my family. And with that then goes, time is the most precious gift you can give them. And it's that whole thing of, yeah, I'm building wealth, I'm building a legacy, I'm doing all sorts of things, but time slipped by and I just didn't give my family the time they needed. So I've changed since then, and I will devote any time I can to helping anyone in the family with whatever they need. And if that means stopping something at work to go and do that, I'll do it, because that lesson of lying there waiting for the ambos is one that now lives with me.
Yeah. What a wonderful story, Steve. Thank you. One of the standard questions that I like to ask every guest, because I am so fortunate to have such amazing people that I have these conversations with, is where they're getting their inspiration from. So what is a book that you would recommend for our audience?
I think that Jocko Willink one, Extreme Ownership, that I mentioned at the start, is a good one for people to read. I think it's well worth looking at that. But I came across one just recently that's been launched. It's by a lady named Preeti Bowler, who wrote a book called The Shift Code Leadership. And the reason I like it is it talks about leaders changing their behaviours, and that the way you behave informs your leadership. And she's got lots of wonderful examples in there of people who accidentally stifle discussion, do all sorts of things without meaning to.
Yeah.
And it's not a case of reading a million books to discuss leadership. It's a case of, and a guy asked a question at her book launch. He stood up and he said, I researched recently and found there are over 30,000 books on leadership in existence at the moment. What makes yours different? And her comment was, mine talks about behaviour being leadership, not principles or anything else involved. It's about what you do and what you say, not anything else. So that one resonated with me and fits with the philosophy that I believe.
That's really good. And if a good answer to, a question that could be determined as a little bit of a smart aleck question, but only for a cynic like me. How can people learn more about you and your business?
Probably LinkedIn is the best way.
Yep.
If they look up Steve Stanley on LinkedIn, they will come across me, and from there they can link on to other avenues, which I'm more than happy to get involved with. But yeah, that'd be the best way for that to happen.
Very good. What haven't we covered off today that you wanted to talk about?
I don't think there's anything left that springs to mind from the book or is an issue. I think, that we did talk earlier about difficult conversations.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things in the book is
Avoiding
don't delay.
Yeah, avoiding tough decisions or tough conversations.
Yeah. I mean, essentially what that is about is at some point in time, you're going to have a tough conversation with someone. The longer you put it off, the more you think about it, the more you worry about it, the more you determine different outcomes from it. And the same with making tough decisions. I think somebody once said, making a mediocre decision is better than making no decision at all.
Yeah.
And I think we need to do that. And I think we need to hold those tough conversations when they're due. And I've always said to people, if you've got a tough decision to make or a tough conversation to have, when you go to work the next day, do it first. Have that tough conversation first, because the rest of the day is a lot easier. If you sit there all day thinking, I'll do it at 4 o'clock, you'll be worried all day about how that's going to go down, and it will impact the rest of your work for the day. So it's like, address these things, work out how to have the conversation and get off your backside and go and have it.
Very good. What a nice way to end, Steve. I feel blessed to have you in my orbit. Time we chat, I really do feel fortunate. I owe a debt of gratitude because you reviewed 2 of my books and have read the 3rd one and provided some wonderful comments there. As I expected, just such a wealth of depth of insight. So thank you so much for sharing your time with me today.
Thanks for talking to me. I really appreciate it, Brad.
Thank you. Well, I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I did. If you'd be kind enough to leave a review for the podcast, that'd be really helpful to other like-minded entrepreneurs, and then we can grow our community. If you want to find out more about our guests, head over to evolutionpartners.com.au/podcast, where you can find show notes and other additional reading. Hope to see you back next week. Until then, keep thriving.